Deep in the ocean, an orca pod is on the hunt. But these aren't your average orcas. These guys are organized.
Marketing team, did you get those social media posts scheduled for the SEAL migration?
Aye, Captain. We even have an automated notification for all pod managers when they go live.
They use Monday.com to keep their teamwork sharp, their communication clear, and their goals in sight. Monday.com. For whatever you run, even orcas. Go to Monday.com to dive deeper.
Well, I don't see the point in waiting any longer. So let's bring her out. The star attraction, the one you came to see. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Miss Judy Gold.
Okay, everyone. Hello. I definitely had a lot of coffee this morning. Welcome to Kill Me Now. Our guest today has a brand new album out. First album, only album, Airports Animals. He is a filmmaker. He is an activist. He is a comedian, writer, producer. You know, he does a lot. So you should all feel like shit when I welcome to the podcast today, ladies and gentlemen, Sean Devlin. Woo!
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Sean, how are you? Mazel tov. Mazel tov on your album.
Thank you.
As a comedian, I've been doing this since I'm 19. I grew up listening to comedy albums. That's how we listened to stand up. And I feel like it's an interesting choice for you to do an album when you're a filmmaker. It's fascinating to me. I would listen to comedy albums over and over and wanted to hear these bits over and over. And once someone sees a comedy special, that's it. They don't want to see that stuff anymore. So why did you decide I'm gonna do an album and not shoot a special? Because you are a filmmaker.
I guess it was cheaper.
Money, yeah. Anyway, so you went the route of a comedy album because it was cheaper. I love listening. It gives you more. And you said you're not a physical, your presence on stage isn't going to help.
I'm not doing act outs. So, it definitely felt natural to just do audio. And it was, did you say you started when you were 19?
Yeah.
I also started at 19.
Yes, I know. I have it written down here.
And it felt like if I took this long, if I took 18 years, like I'll just do one baby step of doing audio, and then maybe in 18 more years I can do a special. Right.
So your 19 years old was 2002, and
yes.
My 19 years old was 1981. Okay, take care, everyone. Anyway, let's go back. Your name is Sean Yops. Like, I want to say it right, but I'm not gonna. Sean
That's okay.
Yopsai or Yopsy?
In English, it's Sabine.
Oh, it's not Yop Sabine?
Yeah, Yap Sabine. Sorry, there's three names.
Sean Yop Sabine Devlin.
Yeah.
I love it. Such a beautiful name.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's actually a story full of family drama and conflict, which was that on my father's side, everyone's Irish, yeah. Mother's side, Filipino Chinese.
Right.
My mom's last name was Yap. She didn't take my dad's name when they got married. She was a very strong woman. She was the bread earner in our household. So she was like, if anything, you should take my name. And so she refused to take his name. And then when I was born, my father's mother, this, very rigid old Irish woman, never liked that my mom didn't take the family name. And so swooped in, like literally after she had given birth. Still, I mean, I don't know how that works, but it sounds like it's really,
but they do swoop in. They swoop in, yeah.
And so in that very vulnerable moment, she swooped in and said, I'm naming him.
Fuck her.
And wanted me to have a full Irish name. So Sean with the Celtic spelling and everything.
Right.
And then Devlin. And so my mom conceded to sort of make peace, but she put her last name as my middle name and then gave me a Chinese last name as well, Sabine, that she made up. So there was sort of like this inner family war played out over my name.
Right. Well, there's a lot of interfamily wars, and I find your family to be fucking fascinating. Your mother grew up in the Philippines. She was a squatter. They escaped the Marcos regime, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. She lived in those conditions till she was a teenager. And then, she got out in her early 20s.
She went to University of Alberta. Where
wow.
Oh, I do.
Amazing.
She went to University of Alberta, where she met your father at a fundraising dinner for striking nurses, and he was serving soup. Okay. So
how do you even know that one? I mean, I've told people that before, but I don't even remember where. That's amazing.
I do a lot of research, and everyone comes on as like, wait, what? How did you? And I find people fascinating. And this is a labor of love, my podcast, because God only knows I make no money, but I just feel like people's stories are so important. Your mother, and I'm so sorry about her loss. She sounds like she was Filipino and Chinese. Did she talk at all about her upbringing? I mean, to come to Canada, right? And it must have been, as a Jew, and I have a lot of friends whose parents were Holocaust survivors and stuff. Was there any sort of survivor guilt from your mother or anything she passed down to you? Or did you feel any sadness from her? I mean, the difference between your parents' upbringing is so incredible,
Yeah. Yeah.
And your mother was the accomplished one. So what was that? It must have been crazy growing up in that house.
Yeah, I was the only child. So it's like all the focus,
right.
Everything, revolved around me. I would describe it more like pressure. Not necessarily guilt. Any guilt was just of my own creation. And both my parents were raised Catholic. My mom was actually, before she immigrated, going to become a nun until she had a bad encounter with a priest who wanted to date her.
Oh my God. Thank God I'm a Jew.
Yeah.
Okay.
so she left the church, and my dad was raised, was an altar boy as a child, but he also, abandoned that as a teen. But I still had some of that Catholicism in my blood. So I definitely created certain guilt complexes, I think. But yeah, she just passed on pressure. So she would say, really specific, efficient things like, it took 8 generations of my family to get to you and the opportunity that you have with this math test.
Oh my God. I'm going to say that is equal to worse than Jewish guilt. That is really good. Okay. And what would you feel like? You didn't even have a sibling to go, Mom is like fucking like really putting the pressure on. Like, I know you guys suffered, but it's a fucking math test,
Yeah. I just bottled it up and did the work. So I did really well in school, pretty much in all my classes, until I discovered comedy and realized that I wanted to be a funny person when I was about 13, maybe. And then I abandoned a lot of my academic pursuits. And that was a very difficult shift for my mother.
Yeah, that's about the time, I have 2 kids, 2 sons. That's about the time where you just are like, I had kids because why? That 13-year-old. But so growing up, you're Canadian. Your mother was born and raised on the island of Tadobon.
Oh, Tacloban is the capital
Tacloban.
city.
Yeah.
Is the capital city in Leyte Island. So she was born on that island, but in a different town called Bateau.
Okay. My CL looked like a D. Okay. What was school like? I mean, was it just, first of all, as an American, the idea that you never had to worry about health insurance and all that. I mean, when I perform in Canada, I have such an edge because there's so much injustice. I mean, you really point out injustice. That's your, soul, right? It makes me so angry. And sometimes when I get on stage and I'm talking about, orange fuckface or the shit that goes on in our country, it's like the audiences, I have to say, in Canada are much more relaxed. Don't you think? They don't have to think about every fucking problem is a confluence of more problems to solve that problem. So
yeah.
Do you find that with American audiences versus Canadian? And what was it like growing up without those kind of issues,
Yeah, I mean, healthcare is great. I think the best word for Americans to hear is that the state of your healthcare is pathetic. Like, I know that's hard to hear for a country that has a lot of pride, but yeah, what y'all are getting out of your whole deal over there is pretty pathetic. Right. I'm sorry to break it that way. But yeah, it was great growing up with healthcare. School for me, the first 10 years we were in Ottawa. My mom worked for the government and we were in like subsidized housing with a bunch of migrant families. So I grew up with kids from Jamaica and Tanzania and South America. It was like really diverse.
Oh, it was diverse. And then you moved to Ontario?
Yeah, Guelph, Ontario, much smaller rural town. But my mom got a job teaching at a university, so we got to buy our first house and this sort of thing. So it was definitely a step up, but it was a very, very white, sort of borderline rural town. And so school was really, really different there. And yeah, that's where I just found comedy as a survival mechanism because
right. Because
in terms of
that's so fascinating that your mother also had two different lives, but that you were so comfortable at such a young age and fit in, it was like, and then you go somewhere and you're the other, which is exactly where comedy stems from.
Yeah. And I think it's also an interesting nuance of we were on the upswing of class mobility, which is kind of the dream, right? Like that she would come to the country within, 10 years, be able to be middle class. And so on paper, financially, it was a fantastic step. For me personally, as a kid entering, the formative years of adolescence, it was shocking.
Right.
And I just literally didn't even know what racism was until we moved to this town.
Fucking crazy.
And I do remember the first time I experienced it. We were playing soccer. I was an athlete, soccer, hockey mostly. And it was all white kids. It was gym class. I was doing really well, scoring goals, and thought, this is a great introduction for me to this group of kids. And then this kid on the other team who was pretty good and I think a bit jealous started calling me Ching. And it was just like, Ching, like, get Ching, take the ball away from Ching. And then eventually everyone on his team started calling me Ching. And then eventually everyone on my team started calling me Ching. And I was just kind of confused. Like, I honestly, for a while, thought that they were confusing me with like another Asian kid who was good at soccer, maybe. But after a while, the gym teacher blew the whistle and stopped the game. And to his credit, late 80s or what is this, early 90s, I guess, rural Ontario, this gym teacher wasn't getting like racial sensitivity training. He wasn't equipped to deal with this, but he did his best. So he stopped the game and he took me aside privately, put his hand on my shoulder, and he says, "Hey son, how you doing?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm okay." And he said, "Is your name Ching?"
No way.
Yeah, because I was new, so he also didn't know my name.
Right.
So he just wanted to check, and I said, "No, my name's Sean," and he said, "Oh, okay." And then he realized what was happening, but then he still wanted to check. He said, "Do you like it when they call you Ching?" And I said, "No, not really. They could just call me Sean." And so at the end of the gym class, he made them all circle up, and he said, "Today's lesson is Sean's name is not Ching." And he made all the kids repeat this over and over. And I was just kind of awkwardly watching this and thinking how strange the curriculum was in this new town. But that was when I first realized that I looked different.
Right.
It continued from there, but it was such a white town that a lot of the racism was like not specific enough to be hurtful because they didn't know what a Filipino.
Well, they're dumb. They were dumb too.
So mostly I got slurs for like Pakistani people and Middle Eastern people, which again, it's not accurate enough it's still hateful, but not accurate enough to really cut.
Right.
But that's sort of what I navigated. And that's where I just found comedy as a way to take control of social situations.
It's such a coping mechanism and it's a weapon. And, when you're good at it, it's a really effective weapon. And it's disarming.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with a Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Did you ever go home to your parents and say, like, I'm being called Ching and what the fuck is going on here? Or did you protect them?
There was, I guess I don't know if I guess I was protecting them. I just didn't tell them. I think because I didn't have siblings, there was a lot that went unsaid in our family, including like anything and everything to do with sex and the body.
Please, same.
So I never told them. And it wasn't until my 20s that because I would talk about it on stage. I would tell some of these stories on stage. And then I told them about it and they were shocked a bit. And I definitely think my mom was quite sad that she didn't kind of know that this was happening. But she also spoke Mandarin, Cantonese, Tagalog, Cebuano. She spoke like 6 languages. She never taught me any of these languages, like not even a sentence. And so on some level, she also, I think, was aware that, I might be bullied and definitely tried to have me assimilate in the best way possible she could.
Did your mother cook?
Yeah, not really.
That sucks.
Yeah,
that fucking sucks.
She would do certain things around holidays. She would make spring rolls and something like that around holidays. But that was like special occasion. The rest of the time, she was really like, going to work, putting on her little blazer with like padded shoulders.
Right. Yeah.
And
shoulder pads.
My dad was more the one who cooked. Yeah. So she really rejected a lot of the gender norm things about. I
love her.
Like, for instance, bake sales. Like, we'd have these bake sales, and I would always come home and say, "Oh, Mom, I'm supposed to ask you to like bake a pie because I need to sell it at school so we can buy another soccer ball or something." And she was always so offended that she was being asked to bake to fundraise for the school that already had tax money supporting it.
Right.
And
that's what they do something, the women who don't work because they serve. Yeah.
And so she always resented this. And so she would take me to the farmer's market and buy these chocolate cakes from these Mennonite women. And then she would make me lie. She would say, "Okay, go to school and say that I made this."
I love her.
And I would, and people loved those cakes because I don't know if you're aware, but Mennonites eat chocolate cake.
Yeah, we have the Amish near. Yeah, it's really good. So, your parents were did they have a good marriage? They're so different. Do you think they were in love with each other?
I think they were definitely in love. I saw them kiss and heard them have sex several
Ew.
times.
Yes, that's good.
um, but yeah, they were very different in terms of their background and their personality. My dad was like very quiet, kind of reserved person, but they eventually worked in the same field, so they would just talk work all the time. And because I was an only child, I literally just would sit there and not know what
Right.
they're talking about, and eventually just had to learn a bunch of bigger words, like
Right.
beyond my vocabulary, to try to understand what they were talking about. They also they worked together in Mozambique in the 70s,
Wow.
when that country had achieved independence, and there was an actual Marxist government, trying to African independent Marxist government trying to establish themselves, and they were working in the education department there, and just trying to help through a volunteer service. And so they learned Portuguese. The reason I explain all that is that
Wow.
my childhood, whenever they wanted to argue, which was a lot, they would argue in Portuguese. So I wouldn't know what they were saying, but
Yeah.
obviously they were arguing. And
Right.
in my adulthood, I had the fortune to eventually go a couple times and work in Brazil. And when I got there and started hearing Portuguese, I was like, all these people are so angry. And I realized that I just
That
interpreted
was a cognitive. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so funny.
that Portuguese was the language of anger.
Yeah, my mother and my grandmother. I remember my grandmother slept over every weekend, and I shared a room with her. She was born in 1896, and she was just incredible. And in the mornings, I would hear her and my mother, and whenever they didn't want us to know, they would speak German, which German with a little Yiddish. And I guess my family came from Hungary, but they spoke German because because the borders changed all the time. And I thought they were speaking Spanish. So I took Spanish in high school, and they were speaking German. Okay, so... but I would always hear like Aachen, Buchen, Buchen, Judith, Buchen, and I'm like, what? And it was so fucking annoying. So where do you think? All right, and then we'll move on. I'm just fascinated by your mother. This is a mother.
No, I love it. I'm so happy to talk about her.
Where do you think she got? I mean, because you talk about that your parents were very political, very engaged. And where do you think she got this incredible feminist? I mean, she's a feminist to the nth degree. She's way ahead of her time. Where do you think, and growing up like that, how do you think she got like that? I mean, it's incredible. And then my part two of the question is, how do you think it affects you as a straight guy that you were raised by an ardent feminist?
Yeah. So for my mom, I think it's definitely on the matrilineal side of her family, but some of the context there is her dad, who was the Chinese person in her family. He was actually sold as a boy. So he was born in mainland China and then was sold to a wealthier family that wanted a boy, that then took him to the Philippines. So I never met him or my grandmother on that side of the family, but from what I heard from my mom, he was just a really kind of lost man, because he had been sold, and the family that bought him sort of bought him as an asset, and he was eventually homeless himself because the family kind of sort of neglected him. So he really just was pretty deeply confused, I think. Whereas on my mom's side, her mom seemed like a really strong woman, but she died when my mom was about 4 or 5 from tuberculosis.
Ugh.
But then my mom, the period where she was a squatter, was she was raised by her grandmother. And from what I understand, she was an incredibly strong woman who raised her under these extreme circumstances until she eventually passed. And then my mom had to, journey across the country to go find her dad. But I think she got a lot of that from her mother, and then largely from her grandmother, who did really know who she was. And for instance, so her name was Philomena de Gohoy. Her last name was de Gohoy, but the de Gohoy family was a family from a neighboring island that had actually been a central part of one of the first wars for independence against the Spanish. So even though that family had been essentially eradicated and chased out, very similar to what happened with a lot of Jewish families,
Right.
The de Gohoy family, they all changed their names.
Like the Jews, yeah.
Yeah, to hide it. But my great-grandmother refused. She kept the name.
Love her.
Because she wanted, the people that came after to know what the lineage was. So I definitely think it came from that. And I think when you have an experience like that, but then you're in a country where you get to see patriarchy played out to the extent that there's an actual dictator, I think your opinion of men and the role of women becomes, at least for my mom, becomes pretty clear.
Right.
And my dad is just, and I say this in a complimentary way, is just a softie. He's just a soft guy.
Yeah.
And I think she loved that and sought that out.
Right.
And so, yeah, I definitely grew up with a different model of both femininity and masculinity. And yeah, it definitely impacts who I am as a person, as a straight man.
You have a daughter? Yeah, it's so.
Oh, no,
awesome.
I don't have a daughter. No, I mean, that would be that. I certainly.
Oh, no, you have a wife. Okay.
Yeah, no. A wife. But I'm definitely told by, women that I have very feminine.
Yeah, you're not.
Energy.
Yeah, you're definitely in touch with all sides of you. Like that's what I loved about your comedy too. It's so, you don't.
Thank you.
Like I'm a lessee and I have 2 straight sons. And they're very, they know how to treat women. They have female friends, there's no, I don't know how to be a friend with, like all these guys, they don't objectify every single woman they see. But there's a bro factor, which I don't know where the fuck they got it from. They're just into sports and they're like, yeah. So, I mean, I just love your mother. I'm sorry that but did she ever find her father?
She did. So when her grandmother eventually passed away, her uncle came and took her and said, I'm going to take you to find your father. And so she had to journey to some other islands. She ended up on the island of Cebu where he was working in a noodle factory.
Oh my God.
And I like to tell people that if I tell you that my grandfather was Chinese and you assume that he worked in a noodle factory, you would be racist, but you would also be right.
I love that.
And so she eventually connected with him, and that was, I think she was about 13 at that point. But it was a strained relationship because he had moved on, and actually, I'm comfortable to share this. I think you'll love this. This is like a scoop, if you will, a minor scoop. When my mother passed away just a few years ago, we found something in her safety deposit box that she had kept secret from us. And we knew as she got older that she, there was a lot of stuff in her memory that she was struggling with mental health wise. And she had this constant need to kind of work, and we didn't really know where that came from. And so it turned out that her father actually had another wife and family in China.
What?
And so her being Catholic, the Philippines intensely Catholic, but also in the Chinese culture, that's like if you see the movie Crazy Rich Asians, this is literally like the central plot at the end.
Right.
Is that so? That was my mom, was that she kept this secret, even from her family, from my dad and myself. And so I think that really just made her relationship with him really, complicated, and also made her have a certain opinion of men.
Right. So that definitely colored her opinion.
Definitely.
But so you didn't do 23andMe or anything? or ancestry, because then you would have found all your.
Oh, I didn't. I've
Relics.
never done any of that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's an
you'll find
interesting
them all.
point.
That's right.
Wow. Okay. I've never even thought of doing that. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but yeah, that I might go
You
do
would
that.
definitely find them all. Oh, that's
Right.
so interesting.
This week's episode of It's Judy Show with Judy Gold is sponsored by BetterHelp. And if you know me, which I think you do because you're listening to my podcast right now, you know that I am a big advocate for therapy. I think it benefits everyone. I think there's so many people who need it, who don't partake. It is so important for your emotional health and well-being. Therapy is fantastic. It is in every stretch of the imagination. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, please do it. But please give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's flexible. It suits your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. I have switched therapists in my life. I've had many, many therapists, and sometimes it's not a great fit for you, but don't give up. Therapy is beneficial. You can learn about yourself, you can process, and just be emotionally healthy. I'm telling you, do it. BetterHelp is great because, when I used to schlep to my therapist's office, it was so annoying. You have to do it, and you sit there and you wait, and then I'm telling you, doing it online is fantastic. And BetterHelp is amazing. I know a lot of people who've used it. So if you're thinking about therapy, go to BetterHelp.com. Let the gratitude flow. This is Gratitude Month, people. So you need to let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/JudyGold, JudyGold, today, and you will get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/JudyGold. You're welcome.
You said that you got to high school and you found comedy. So, two things. I read that you idolized Tom Green's cable show.
Yeah.
And also, I love this when you talk about this. You saw a comedy show in Dublin, and you realized that you had this theory about why Irish people are funny, which is called the Gaelic brain. And I found this fascinating. Can you tell everyone about the Gaelic brain? Go.
Yeah, so this was maybe 7 years ago. I went to Ireland for the first time. My mom and my dad had both been there, but I didn't really know why we were going. I knew they had to go and that I wanted to go. And we did things like visit the cemeteries where my dad's, family had been buried and he had never visited. And then I realized it was something about aging that, we went to the cemetery where his grandmother was, and he just started crying, and my mom was crying, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? And it was literally this moment where I for the first time felt like I had to be the adult. So I sort of kind of, held them and said a prayer because they seemed incapable in this moment of what was necessary. But yeah, I said, I want to go see a comedy show. I need to see comedy. And we weren't there for very long, but there was this gentleman, Cecil Sheridan, who was doing a one-man monologue show called The Gaelic Brain. And you would actually love it. I wish maybe there's a recording somewhere, or if you could seek him out, because he spends a lot of time riffing on, what we understand to be the Jewish kind of classic humor and Irish humor. And specifically what he points out as the Gaelic brain is that when the British came in and Irish folks were prevented legally from speaking their language, it meant that everyone grew up thinking every thought in Gaelic in their head, and then thinking how to turn that into English and then speaking it in English and trying to do that on the spot in order to not, go to jail or God knows what, even worse maybe. And his belief is that generations and generations of this created this sharpened mind that Irish had, where basically you had to do, twice the thinking
Right.
that a normal person does, who can just think in their language and speak it. And he said, when you have to do twice the thinking and think so quickly, there's the opportunity to edit out thoughts. So you could think of really sharp, witty things to say, and then maybe choose not to say them because you don't want to piss anyone off. But yeah, his belief was that this just sharpened the Irish mind and led to this kind of quick-witted Irishness that is essentially a stereotype, but also true if you spend time with Irish people, especially when they're drinking. There's like so much, like my uncle on that side, the only man I've ever seen who could insult my mother to her face, and she loved it.
Right.
She would be cackling with laughter. And I had literally never seen anyone have the courage to insult her, like in jest. And he could do it for hours, just burning her over and over, like making fun of her. And she loved it. And yeah, so I really like this idea of the Gaelic brain, but it's from, or I don't know where he sourced it, if it was his own invention, but his name is Cecil Sheridan.
That's interesting about your mother, because as a comic, to get mocked by another comic is like I love you. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
It's like, I am taking the time to, say shit to you because I care about you. But when you talk about the Gaelic brain, it's also, that's what we do on stage. Like, people don't realize we're constantly editing and deciding, and maybe I won't, they're going to hate this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing this tag. They have, that's what we're constantly, it's such a part of stand-up. Yeah. So when you watched Tom Green's cable access show, and you studied with the clown teacher, Philippe Goyer.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yeah. That was much later, but so the Tom Green thing was, Tom Green's from Ottawa. Right. Because I was from Ottawa when I was about 12. His show was originally just like public access, right? Like not even on, national, regional television. But there was this guy, I think he was still a teenager maybe, or certainly he acted like a teenager. Right. And he just didn't give a shit about anyone. He was just out there doing this outrageous stuff. And I mean, I think not too many people, I think, hold him up in high esteem, but I think he was really ahead of his time, because this was before Jackass. This was before reality television. Right. And he was like, not just doing pranks, but also like turned his family into characters. Like, he would mess with his dad and stuff that's now kind of what you see in every reality TV show. He was just doing this with a camcorder. But more importantly, he was just a kid from Ottawa. So when I saw that, I just thought, oh, you could do this. Like, you can just be silly and get on TV and become, that could be your job. Yeah, it's so funny. I think we all have that. Like, the realization, wait, I can do this for a living. Like, when I saw Joan Rivers and Elaine Boozler and Toady Field, like all these people, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. And it was a cumulative thing. So this was probably 92 maybe. Right. But then 93, 94 was Mike Myers breaking out, Austin Powers, Jim Carrey breaking out, Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura. And I was the perfect age for all that comedy. And those were also two guys from Southern Ontario. Right. So it was just so clear to me that not only was it possible, but it's kind of a thing, like that people from Southern Ontario become comedians. So that was a really key couple of years there for me when I was like 10 to 13, where I just knew, like, oh, that's that's where I want to be. The Philippe Goyer thing was about 9 years ago. So I was like 10 years into stand-up by this point. Sacha Baron Cohen had become my comedy idol. And I had a friend who had studied at a clown school in Paris for 2 years, and I was kind of curious about it, and, asked her about it. And she had studied under this guy, Philippe Goyer, and I said, oh, that's really interesting. She would talk about the class. It sounded really terrifying to me. And she sent me a link to a testimonial from Sacha Baron Cohen, where he basically just credits Philippe Gaulier for everything he does. Like, says, this is the funniest guy in the world. You know, all of my characters are
Fearless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are rooted in things I learned from this man. And so it was really Sacha Baron Cohen's testimonial that made me say, I need to go meet this guy, study with this guy. So it was in Toronto. I went out to Toronto for like a 3-week intensive, and it was definitely artistically the hardest thing I've ever done. I wanted to quit, which is not very common for me to want to quit something. But it's because I'm not much of an improviser, and most of the class was just improv. He would ask you to improvise on the spot. He holds this giant drum, and the moment he doesn't like what you're doing, he bangs this drum, makes you stop, and singles you out in front of the whole class and just rips into you, just makes fun of you, but in the funniest way. Like, he's so good at it, everyone's laughing at you. And then you sit down kind of humbled, and you have to have the courage to keep jumping up there and trying and inviting his scorn. And there was a lot of things that I learned in there, but I think at a fundamental level, he gives you an experience that is so difficult that literally, since I took that class, I know that I will never have a more difficult experience on stage.
That's important, because that's what makes you so comfortable, because you're like, no, you can't. That experience, humiliation really will make you such a better comic, you know? It's interesting that you say that when you decided to do, I mean, when it's, again, you decided to do an album, and you say, I'm not really the kind of performer you need to see, but clowning you need to see, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting.
And there is a joke on your album where you explain your face. The joke about, the joke about, I love that joke.
I'm making a skeptical face and revealing to this racist guy that I'm actually a bit Chinese. I would say, you know, it's a good point. Well, one of the questions I did ask him, because I was struggling so much in this class, is I said, what's the difference between a clown and a comedian? And he told me it's very simple. A comedian is someone who goes on stage, says something that they think is funny, and the audience laughs. And a clown is someone who goes on stage and says or does something that they think is funny, and the audience doesn't laugh. But the way the clown responds to the failure endears them to the audience, and eventually that thing becomes funny. And I think you can hear some of that in my stand-up, because I really commit to things, and just if I think it's funny, and so even it's not that funny, I'll just keep going back to it, and I'll even keep saying the same sentence. I do the same
thing. I do the same thing. Like, when I don't get a laugh, sometimes it's like, I'm like, really? I work so hard, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so funny, because they really do laugh, because you're so brutally honest. But then some people will come up after the show and be like, tough crowd. I'm like, no, I was having fun.
Yeah.
One of my jokes doesn't work. That's part of the fun, you know?
Yeah.
Or if an audience member says something that's funnier than what I said, and I'm like, great, I've been working on this for 40 fucking years, and this guy, you know? But that's fascinating. I love that. That.
Yeah. He was really focused on, he would call it the flop.
Right.
That you have to be able to live in that. And when you're living in the flop, they always have to be able to see your joy.
Right.
And that's what he would always track when you were improvising in front of him, is if he could see that you weren't enjoying what you were doing, that's when he would hit the drum and he would tear you apart.
And that's why you wanted to quit, because he fucking knew exactly.
Yeah, because I was terrified.
Yeah.
And then I think another concept he had, which honestly I can even just see in how amazing you are at interviewing, but it sounds like you're also doing it in your stand-up, is he said the mistake a lot of people make is they go on stage and they try to be interesting.
Right.
And that the real task is to be interested.
Right.
To be interested in what you're doing. And so when you're saying you say something and then the audience doesn't laugh, and then you decide not to move on, but to interrogate it.
Yes.
And you're taking joy and you're so interested in interrogating your own failure. He would say that that's clowning, that's the spirit of clowning, at least.
I'm a clown.
There you go.
I love that. So you're 19, you go to Yuck Yucks.
Yeah,
this is
Yuck
your
Yucks.
first time on stage?
First time on stage at a Yuck Yucks.
In Ontario, was that? And
No,
then,
so
Yuck Yuck. Wait, I have it written down. Vancouver. God,
yeah, so I was in Guelph, and I knew I was probably writing stand-up in notebooks for the last 2 years of high school with nothing to do with it. Just knowing I was going to do stand-up. Eventually, and wanted to maybe go to Toronto to do it, but it was really hard to coordinate that. We didn't have a car we had a car for some period of high school, but not for many of the years of high school. And so it just wouldn't work out for me to make it to Toronto to do open mic. So I moved to Vancouver when I was 19, and I think it was like my second or third day in the city. I just went to the open mic and finally did it, and bombed horribly. But kept going back because I knew I wanted it, but I didn't know how hard it would be, obviously.
Okay, so you're 19, you've been writing stand-up for 2 years, and like, are you writing jokes or bits? Like
I'm writing
ideas? Yeah.
I'm writing kind of hackneyed versions of what I'm seeing on TV. So I remember one of the first bits I did was about how the Canadian military was getting made fun of because they had sent soldiers to the Middle East and they didn't have the right camouflage. They had just like khakis. And so I had this whole bit about, is the Canadian Army shopping at the Gap? And
that's funny.
I mean, the audience didn't really like it, but yeah, but it was definitely like, I was just mimicking what I was seeing on TV. And, I had read at least one book. I can't remember which one it was, but some kind of how to write stand-up book. So it was, kind of similar to what will happen when I finally do a show after the pandemic. I was just like in isolation writing stuff, but having no reality check from an audience until,
right. So,
which of course is very necessary.
Yeah. That's the whole art form. But anything about school or like, are you carrying a notebook around with you all the time? Is this like on your mind? Like, this is my goal. I got to keep doing this, like practicing, piano or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, it was the first friends I made in the city. So this was my first time just to be out on my own.
Right.
So we're stand-ups. So that kind of like locked me into it of, I got to keep doing this to develop this, a social circle of some sort. And then honestly, it was also comedy albums was, listening to lots of albums at that time, like kind of contemporary albums. And yeah, that's what was pushing me.
Thank you so much for listening to part 1 of Kill Me Now with Sean Devlin. Kill Me Now is produced by Laura Vogel, edited by Colin Schmaling. This podcast would not be possible without the help of Brittany Jo Sowards. Please subscribe. Please leave a review. 5 stars only. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. If you haven't bought my book, yes, I can say that. When They Come for the Comedians, We're All in Trouble. You can get it at my website, judygold.com. You can get my CDs, I was going to say, but you download them now. My albums, also there, and my dates. I'm performing a lot. I have like a lot of gigs coming up. Provincetown, my last 4 shows in Provincetown are tonight, tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday evenings. And then I'm off to a city winery in New York. And I'm going to Minneapolis. So check out my website, judygold.com. Follow me on Insta and Twitter at Judy Gold, JEWDYGOLD. Like Jew, because I'm Jew. Also, if you're not vaxxed, there's something really wrong with you, and you need to get vaxxed unless you have like a really valid medical excuse. Get vaxxed, wear a fucking mask. I'm wearing 2 masks whenever I travel. I don't even take it off on the airplane. Let's fucking eradicate this shit virus and fuck shit ass. And I'm thinking about the soldiers who gave up their lives for us and for representing our country. I'm not being political. Well, I guess I am. I just, we got to have some good news soon. You know what I'm saying? So fucking wear a mask, get vaxxed. I love you all for listening. If you're listening till the end, I love you even more. And by the way, I'm recording this on my mother's 99th birthday. I miss you so much, Ruth. And as we always say, so long.
Don't forget to tune in next week to Just Kill Me Now.
It's Just Kill Me.
Oh. Don't forget to turn for part 2 on Just Kill Me.
No, it's not. It's
Just Kill Me.
No.
Judy Gold's Just Kill Me.
Just.
Just Kill Me Now.